We live in a time of a global pandemic, one that has affected and reshaped our lives in a way that we a few months ago could never have imagined. And this actually brings us closer to our fellow humans who lived 3,000 to 4,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia, who were quite regularly confronted with illness outbreaks and epidemics. And for them, illnesses that were out of their control and uncertain, such as epidemics, were considered to be the cause of one of the many deities that they knew. So the experience of epidemics back then is actually quite similar to the way we experience the SARS-CoV-2 or the corona pandemic at the moment. So for them, epidemics were considered disastrous, is something we see in the terms that they use to describe epidemics. So such as ukultu, which means the devouring of the land by a deity, and mutanu, which means multiple cases of deaths. And also they tried to record where an epidemic occurred. They tried to keep track of how fast it spread, so they would report cases, new cases and deaths in a certain area over a certain amount of time. And for them, an epidemic was considered over when no new cases or deaths occurred. And this we can see in a letter that's about 3,800 years old from the kingdom of Mari. The hand of the deity has eased over the bank of the Euphrates and the entire land. It has not struck again, when previously on one day 10 people and 5 youngsters had died. Now the hand of the deity eased and not one person died over a single day. The deity is reconciled. Whereas nowadays we're waiting for a vaccine for which we at least have an estimated timeline, people in ancient Mesopotamia had to wait for an enraged deity to calm down. And this shows that the containment of the epidemic is out of the hands of humans and in the hands of the divine. And this would have conjured up questions like how long? And we do indeed see these questions being asked in prayers of lamentation and suffering. So epidemics forced people into the unknown and into times of waiting. So what did Mesopotamians do in this time of waiting? How did they cope with the epidemic and how did they try to influence its demise? So firstly, they also applied social distancing and isolation to avoid the spreading. People, individuals and entire villages were quarantined. Physicians would recommend to their patients not to go out so that they could recover and not infect others, and they would not enter each other's houses. And secondly, they would try to appease the deity whose wrath had caused the epidemic, for instance by collectively praying and making offerings. And thirdly, they also had a future-oriented approach. They tried to prevent new epidemics in the future. So they would, when a village was considered epidemic-free, they would apply purifying and cleansing rites in order for the epidemic not to come back. And another form of prevention would be prophylactic rituals. So in the first millennium BCE, we see more often that diseases and epidemics were considered to be caused by demonic forces. And these evil bringers and bringers of chaos could be averted through rituals, with which they then had some sort of control over the future. So we can say that during times of epidemics in ancient Mesopotamia, people were forced to think about the future, for instance, to prevent new outbreaks, but mostly it was a matter of the present. It was a time of waiting, a time of very little control, even over time itself. And this will be something that many of us can recognize at the moment. We live in an everlasting present. We are waiting for the pandemic, for the lockdown, for the restrictions to be over. We're waiting to recover. We're waiting to get out of quarantine. And we're waiting for the time after the future, which is even more out of control than it ever was.